Okay, so Life is Strange Double Exposure has been already out for a few weeks, and even though I think it was an awesome game, I still had a few questions which I couldn't stop thinking about. Like for example, why did Max have this headache after she took a photo of the sky on the roof? Or how could she even shoot Safi when she was not on the Overlook yet in episode 1, but still, we could hear the shot? And after that, how could Safi still be walking there and talking on her phone like nothing happened when he already heard a shot? And when Max came to the Overlook, she was already dead. There are still more questions like, for example, what happened to Max from the living world? What happened to Detective Alderman? What are Diamond's powers? And what do those Polaroids all around the game mean? There are so many questions which seem as unanswered or even as a plot holes, and I also was afraid of those questions being just plot holes, which would be sad because I love this game series and I don't want to see it becoming just a cash cow. I don't mind having more Life is Strange games. In fact, I love the idea. I just want to be sure that people in Deck 9 know what they're doing and won't ruin these games. Alright, back to those questions. So in Chapter 1, we see Max, Moses and Safi on the roof of the astronomy department. At the end of the scene, Safi gets a call. She then leaves. After that, Max takes a photo of the sky. Then, she suddenly has a strong headache for a moment. Something that happened to her in Life is Strange 1 when she was overusing her powers of rewind, or she couldn't rewind any further. Max then leaves as well. She listens to some music, and after she walks for a while, she notices an owl sitting on a statue. She then takes a photo of the owl. Suddenly, she has another strong headache and passes out. When she wakes up, she has a nosebleed, another sign of overusing her powers. But Max wasn't using her powers, at least not this Max. So, who was? To make things clear, when I saw this scene in the extended gameplay, which came only a while after the first trailer was released, I immediately had a theory that Max, or at least some version of her, might be the murderer. By that time, I had no idea that the game would have such a crazy twist. Anyway, back to the scene. Max realizes that Safi might be in danger, and then she follows her to the Overlook. We see Safi calling up there, and she's safe. Max then follows the path, and suddenly, she hears somebody shooting.
Shit!
But a few seconds later, Safi is still alive, walking and calling, but when Max comes to the Overlook, Safi is sitting on the bench, already dead. I think 2 days later, she finds out that there is a parallel universe where everything is the same, except Safi is still alive there. I know that I'm pointing out here all the things we already know, but trust me, we'll come back to them later. In Chapter 2, Max discovers Safi's last photo in the camera, where she is the one with the gun. When she tries to use her old power in Chapter 3 and travels into the moment when Safi took this last photo, we can clearly see the tornado.
It's here too.
Similar to the one in Life is Strange 1. But as we can remember, there was no storm in Chapter 1, and Max powers cannot create another Max. There can be only one at the same time. There are only two exceptions. First, in Life is Strange 1, Episode 5, where Max sees another version of herself in a Two Whales diner. But that was only in her dream. And the second case was in Chapter 5 of Double Exposure, when Max sees herself with a gun in the Blackwell Academy bathroom. This we can count as a consequence of the tornado into which she jumped with Safi. Reality was so broken that probably anything was possible there. So with Max in Chapter 1 passed out after taking a photo of the owl, and she wasn't with Safi when she was shot, and after she heard the shot, Safi was still alive, how could all of this happen? Believe me, this question haunted me for more than a week, and it required a lot of thinking and playing the game twice. The question is, which Max actually shot Safi? Was it Max from the living world? Well, yes, and also no. To understand this matter correctly, we have to first realize some things. We need to understand that originally there was only one timeline. You could call it the living world, but that wouldn't be totally accurate, because it's not the living world as we know it. So let's call it the original timeline. Events in this timeline happened in the way similar to the living timeline, but without Max knowing that Safi would die, and also without any access to any other parallel timeline. Because Max wasn't looking for any evidence of Safi's killer, she probably found out about Safi being a shapeshifter a little differently. Maybe she found out after exposing Lucas, when Safi was on the Overlook with Yasmin. To be honest, that doesn't exactly matter at all. So okay, Max and Safi probably exposed Lucas in the original timeline as well. Lucas then talked to Safi alone. She went to the Overlook and lost control. The tornado appears. She shot Yasmin, and Max used the owl photo to travel back to December 4th, where she shot Safi, which led to the creation of dead and living timelines, and so on. Since that event, it goes the way we remember it. Max from chapter 1 finds dead Safi on the bench. She finds out she can travel between dead and living timelines. She's trying to prevent Safi's murder in living timeline, which leads to Safi losing control again, creating tornado, Max traveling to December 4th once again, but this time as a true hero, finding the third choice. She grabs Safi's hand and jumps with her into the tornado. We can then see breaking timelines and realities, but this time it's not just a dream. Max then takes photos of Moses, Lucas, Gwen, and even herself to separate everybody from Safi. After that, she finds herself with Safi back on the Overlook, where Yasmin is still shot. Safi then leaves, and the next scene we see is a few days later on campus, where we find out that both worlds have merged into a combined world and that everyone now has double memories. One set of memories from the dead world and one from the living world. Safi is alive and we stop the storm. From the looks of damage on campus, we can safely assume that yes, the storm really happened. So what actually happened on the December 4th, when in chapter 1 there was no storm and we still saw Safi alive even after the shot, and when also we were controlling the present Max? Now, it may seem as a huge plot hole, where the only explanation might be, well, because plot got a plot. But trust me, after more than a week of thinking, and after second playthrough, I think I might just have cracked the case. Now, as I already mentioned, at first there was only one original timeline, then both dead and living timelines, and in the end, the combined one. I still couldn't understand how the events of December 4th could happen the way we saw them in the chapter 1. But then, when I replayed the game, I found a solution in chapter 4. We may not know what happened in the original timeline, even though that might not be completely true, we'll come back to that later, but we can see what was happening in both dead and living worlds after Safi lost control of her powers, and that's just enough for us to understand it all. Okay, so in the living timeline, after we exposed Lucas of stealing Maya's potential book, we informed the dead world Moses that we did it. When we then return to the living world to talk to the other Moses, he is excited about what just happened. Then suddenly he, and everybody else, except for Max, gets a sudden strong headache. A few moments later, Safi is uncontrollably in everybody's heads, and they're all yelling what she's yelling at Yasmin. Max then runs to campus to find that the storm and the tornado are back. Nothing surprising, we already knew that. Also on campus, everybody is yelling the things that Safi is yelling at Yasmin on the Overlook. But interesting things start to happen if we switch to the dead timeline. There everything seems pretty much calm and normal. No signs of anything supernatural. Except for one thing. When we take a walk around the campus in the dead world, we come across two characters talking. They're known as Cryptid Enthusiast and True Believer. It might seem like a casual conversation, but it isn't.
You're basically telling me you don't hear that.
I seriously don't hear anything.
It's like, I don't know, a woman yelling. You don't hear that?
Dude, you are freaking me out.
She sounds really upset.
Hey, it's really cold out. Can we please go inside? I'm starting to get a headache. Kyle? Kyle!
What? Sorry.
I said, can we please go inside? My head really hurts.
Yeah, just... one sec.
Whatever Safi's doing, it's spreading here too. I have to hurry.
That means that he also has a headache, as many people in the living world, and can also hear Safi. When you travel back to the living world, you can also find a Polaroid on which you can see Diamond, Reggie, and Loretta. They seem pretty happy on the photo, but when you listen closely, you hear that they're also repeating the things that Safi is yelling at Yasmin. I initially thought that this means that whatever is happening in the living world might also be spreading into some other world which we cannot access. On the second thought, that might not be entirely true, but we'll come back to the Polaroids later. So after the campus scene, we're going after Safi to the Overlook. But when we are going there, we can notice something strange. We can see what's happening in the dead world, but we can no longer travel there. All the crossings are gone.
Wait, where are those freaky doorways I was using? Is the storm screwing with my powers?
And that's exactly the moment when everything clicked together and I realized how it all happened. As you can see, the timeline or world or time or space, maybe all of them, become totally unstable because of the tornado. Max in chapter 5 also calls it
Time vortex.
Maybe both dead and living worlds are starting to merge or collapse into each other, because later in chapter 5, Reggie also realizes
You're right. I remember Safi being shot, and I remember seeing her around campus.
that means the storm is breaking both realities. This is very important for the big revelation. So at the end of chapter 4, Max uses the owl photo to travel back to December 4th. But what if I told you that the following two moments are tied together? If the effects of the tornado, or as Max called it, the time vortex, is able to spread between worlds, what if they can spread also between times? What if, when Safi lost control of her powers and the time vortex appeared, that was exactly the moment when the time and space started to be unstable? What if, when Max traveled back into December 4th, the tornado was the reason why Max didn't see any tornado in chapter 1? Because of the time vortex, the original timeline might be becoming totally unstable, maybe starting to be splitting, but not completely split yet. That might also be the reason why you can find some weird things in chapter 2 when you're going to the Overlook, like some phone ringing, in which when you answer it,
Hello?
Hello? This is Safi. Yes, this is Safi from Fayad.
Speaking. Shit!
also a mug in a tree, or Safi's candies, but with completely different name. And also, how did Safi's future self and the tornado travel back with Max to December 4th?
Storm followed me.
So did I, apparently.
I've never done that before.
We saw that when Max travels back in time through the photo, she takes control of her past self, but she cannot carry any inventory or any person from the future with herself. Answer for this might be easier than it seems. Remember the part in chapter 5 where Max has to separate Safi from everybody using the camera? Yep, exactly. Some parts of Safi are in every of those people, including Max. So, when Max's mind travels into her old self, the part of Safi in Max's mind travels with her as well, because she is in Max's head. She then takes control of Safi from December 4th, and that's also the reason why there is the tornado. It didn't travel back with Max, but with that part of Safi which came back with Max. So, to put all things together, how exactly it happened. The original timeline happened in some way. We don't know exactly how. They exposed Lucas, he talked to Safi, she lost control and wanted to shoot Yasmin. Max got her headache, but as I mentioned, it wasn't just Max from the December 8th after exposing Lucas. It was also Max from the December 4th on the roof. Time and space started to be unstable. Original Max ran to the Overlook, Safi lost control, and Max traveled back to December 4th by photo. Time Vortex travels with her, causing time and space to be unstable there as well. Future Max may wake up a little earlier than Max from Chapter 1, which might be the reason why Max in Chapter 1 couldn't make it to Safi before she died. Anyway, both Maxes wake up and both are heading to the Overlook, not at the same moment. Future Max is on the Overlook with future Safi. Safi takes the photo of Max with the gun, and then after a few moments, Max shoots Safi on the bench. And that's exactly the moment when the universe completely split into two separate worlds. In Chapter 1, we can also see some interference on the screen, indicating that the worlds have been split into two.
Shit!
After the split, they are still not completely stable, and that's why we can still see Safi in Chapter 1, walking and calling. And after she goes behind the corner, Chapter 1 Safi is, because of the world still being unstable, moved into another world, which we know as the living world. She has no idea that anything happened at all. Because of the time vortex breaking the reality, it might be possible that in her direction, she might not have heard a single thing from the splitting part where Max shot her. And Max from Chapter 1 is staying in the dead world with dead Safi. You could also say that the consequence of the time vortex might not be that the storm is in both realities, but only that maybe some things uncontrollably cross from one reality to another. After reality split, both dead and living worlds need some time to stabilize. That's the reason why we cannot travel between them right from the moment when Safi died. In the dead world, Max stays at home for 2 days, completely alone. Then she goes to the university to talk with Yasmin. After the talk with Moses, he leaves the campus. Then suddenly, Max can hear Moses from the living world. And that might be the moment where both worlds were finally close to be stabilized and maybe even synchronized. After we find Safi, we finally find our first crossing to the living world. And since then, we can use these crossings to travel between both worlds anytime we want. There are two main reasons why things in the living timeline are not the same as in the original timeline. Firstly, Max was absent from this world for 2 days. When we travel to her home in the living world, she immediately says,
Oh, wow. I guess I haven't been home in this world for a couple days.
I believe the reason of this is that because Max was the one who shot Safi and ultimately split both worlds, she was the center of it all, and that's why there are not two of them. Anyway, the second reason for the living timeline to be different from the original one is that Max now has the knowledge that Safi might die by her hand. She uses this knowledge to search for an explanation about what happened or what will happen. That's why she finds out about Safi being a shapeshifter at the end of Chapter 3, and everything else happens exactly as we know it. Max finds a third choice, she saves Safi, Safi leaves, and so on. These are just details that don't matter so much anymore because we already answered the main question, how Max could have killed Safi but still see her alive. At the beginning, I mentioned a few more questions which now I would like to answer. I mentioned the Polaroids before. Throughout the game, Max hints that it might be from some third reality, but during writing of script of this video, I thought of another theory. What if those Polaroids are actually from the original timeline, showing us what originally happened before Max traveled back to December 4th. If we don't count Polaroids from Chapter 5, where the reality was falling apart, it might actually make sense. We see some moments which might have been moments from Mac's casual life in the original timeline before Safi lost control. For example, Gwen's flat tires, which might be the work of Safi after she finds out about Gwen being involved in cancelling her book. Then some horror movie night with Safi and Moses having fun at Krampus. You get the idea. Simply, these photos might be giving us the picture of what might have happened in the original timeline, unaffected by Max knowing that Safi would be killed by her. About what happened to Detective Alderman, we saw him in Chapter 3 getting erased from the existence in the dead world after touching his past self from the previous day. He erased himself as he never ever existed. We never hear of him again. So, is he now completely erased? Or is there still any hope for him? Well, on Reddit, in one comment, I found a theory that after both worlds merged, Alderman might be okay, because in the living world, nothing probably happened to him. So, I agree that now he might be safe and sound in the combined world, with memories only from the living world. The last question I wanted to answer, or at least theorize about, is what might be Diamond's powers. At the end of Chapter 5, we see her having nosebleeds and leaving with Safi to get some answers. Again, this is not my theory, I also found it on Reddit, but we might have already seen Diamond's power. I mentioned what happened to Detective Alderman. A day earlier, in Chapter 2, Reggie also saw his past self on the Overlook, solving the puzzle box. What connects those two cases? Yep, Diamond. Reggie is Diamond's close friend, and she must have known that Reggie was there. Also, when Detective Alderman was with Max and Moses at the Overlook, Diamond knew that Moses is going to be there with Max.
Diamond knows where I am and who I'm meeting. So don't do anything stupid.
I deserved that.
So, I don't know exactly how, but it might be possible that Diamond is somehow, maybe unintentionally, creating these past doubles. This is not a plot hole, because we can be quite sure that we will see Diamond's powers in the sequel. It's just interesting to think about it. Also, I need to state that all of this is still unconfirmed, so unless Deck 9 says that it's true, they're all just theories. And who knows, maybe they will confirm it online someday, or in some other way. Or we also might find that Safi's death was just a bunch of plot holes, with no explanation, and that Polaroids are just silly collectibles without any particular meaning. We shall see, and I hope that we will get the answers soon, because I want to believe that Deck 9 really created a masterpiece, and not just some game full of plot holes. Also, there are more questions that might still be unanswered. For example, why on the Overlook, in the dead world, there were flowers exactly in the shape of Safi's body? Who knows? Maybe it was because there was dead body of some person and gifted with powers, and some of her energy might have been released into the ground under her, and that's why there were flowers. There's even a possibility that this is the true reason of all the anomalies which happen on the Overlook, like past selves of Reggie and Detective Alderman. Maybe, if any other person with powers dies, it might have the same effect. But honestly, I would rather not test that theory. I pretty much like all the characters with powers in Life is Strange. So, what are your opinions on these theories? Do you agree, or do you think something else? Or do you still consider it to be just a bunch of plot holes? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks again for watching, and have a nice day.